people tell me that I often come off like extremely confident and like, don't mess with me. I know exactly what I'm talking about. And I don't necessarily feel that way all the time. But when I'm talking about business, I do, because that's why I'm in this business, because the things I know. And so what you want is, you really want to have, whatever business it is, whatever service you're providing, you want to have that kind of confidence, that kind of like, you'd be crazy to go anywhere else. So it starts there. And if that's in place and you get that right, everything else is a lot easier. It's really it's downhill from there. And if you get that wrong, it's really uphill from there. And from there, I would say the very next step, and I never really went into this. I go into this in the business growth system, but it's kind of scattered throughout. It's not as necessarily like a whole module just on this. And if I was to redo the business growth system, I think I might actually create an early module about this. And that is that you really got to construct your profit model. Like, ideally, how is this whole thing going to work? How is this going to be a sustainable business? Like, where are my clients, customers going to come from? Where are my prospects going to come from, et cetera? Because you really have to have a marketing game plan, and a sustainable marketing game plan, because what I've seen, especially online, is that a lot of the gurus nowadays, many of them, former clients of mine, they've built businesses that are really reliant on joint ventures and launches. And that's not you can make a lot of money doing that. And I've certainly made a lot of money doing that, but it's not necessarily the most sustainable business. And there's a lot of challenges with that type of business. It's almost impossible to break free of a business that's a launch dependent business, because every launch is different, and therefore you can't really have a system for launches. I mean, you can have a perpetual launch, but that's very different. And so it's really important to kind of figure out your profit model. Like, how are you going to acquire new customers over the long haul, and get a sense of that? Because it all kind of, once you know you're in the right place, then you got to make sure that you're going to have a consistent flow of new clients. I've worked with some clients recently where, they were launch dependent, or they were situational dependent, in the sense that they had a certain base of customers, but then the market changed, or in the case of the launches, like, they couldn't get the same JV partners, and all of a sudden they were in a very bad situation. And so, I always learn from my clients, like, when they come to me with challenges of like new things that I need to make sure I mention for other people to avoid. And so that's another big thing. One of my mentors, Michael Masterson, someone who I spent a lot of time with, he wrote a book called Ready, Fire, Aim, where he really talks about this exact thing, that until you have a way of buying customers, a scalable way of buying customers, with a front end, a low price product that brings new customers into the door, you don't really have a business. You might be just building a house of cards. And so that's kind of step number one, I would say today. And I don't know that I said that a couple years ago. But once you have that model, once you have a kind of understanding of exactly what it might look like, how you're going to bring in the money, how you're going to bring in the customers, then all the other elements of actually how to run a business become a lot more important. And that's where you kind of you pick a vision of what you want to create for your business, and a vision basically stating like where you're going to be when this thing is done that you've built. And you can't get too tied up on that, because the world changes, and and therefore the likelihood that it will come to fruition exactly as you dreamed and planned is not exactly the highest likelihood. However, you can have a trajectory. You can have based off the vision that you create, you have a way to go, a line of direction. And from there, then it's about really figuring out what needs to happen in the business. This is probably the way I would describe it today, that figuring out, if you know how you're going to make your money, right, your profit model, and you know what kind of business you're building, from those 2 points, you can figure out really everything that needs to be done in the business. And I wrote a report recently about this. This wasn't a free report. This was a client report called Your Business Blueprint. And it starts a little bit further back than where I'm explaining now. It actually, and maybe we'll jump back in a second, but I want to finish this thought first, that it's, with those 2 points, your profit model and your vision, you really can figure out all the things that your business is going to need to do. You could write a long list, and I like to put it in a mind map. And what I like to explain to people is if you put all the tasks that need to happen on that mind map, and then you color code it based on who's responsible. And if you're working by yourself right now, then you're responsible for all of it. The goal is to get so what we do is, when I work with clients, it's like, okay, now let's color code this based on who's responsible. So you're going to be green, and this other person who works for you is going to be red, and whoever else is going to be, orange, and, we just put different colors. But the goal for the business owner is to get their color completely off the map, because when you get your color completely off the map, you're completely free. And so you turn the game of getting free of your business basically into a game. And where it's very clear that when you are hiring people, that the goal is that they're taking over responsibilities, that they're not just an extension of you being able to get more done, that they're actually taking things off your plate. And that's really important. There's other issues that come into running a successful business, whether it be, having really good offers, having good marketing sequences, metrics, building teams, getting A players, and all of the other elements involved. But I would say that those are the critical points. And the only other thing that I would add that I wrote in this report, and that's why I'm just reminded of it, is really when you think about, back to the point I was making earlier about, the 4 overlapping circles and really finding your sweet spot, your positioning that's going to work. The ideal scenario is, even maybe before that, is to know what it is you want to get out of life, and what's your purpose. What's your goal? What's your outcome for yourself? And if you know that, and most people don't, they never really thought it through to the level that they probably should. But once you know that, if you can learn about your marketplace and your prospects and know what they really want out of their life, it's basically a pretty simple proposition that really you have to help them get what they want and figure out a way that makes you get what you want. And, I walk people through stuff like this, but it would take probably the whole interview to just that one concept. But that's how I look at business, basically. It's like, I'm going to help a lot of people get what they want, and by doing so, I'm going to get what I want. And so I got to be very clear about what they want, and I got to be very clear about what I want in order to make that happen. And so that's kind of where we start the thing. Let me add one last thing, though, and then I'll hand it back over to you, Dave. The manifesto was the first free report I ever wrote. And yeah, I think I've written like 7 or 8 free reports, each of them really to introduce a new concept and a new program to the marketplace. Because generally I would bring stuff, I've brought stuff to the marketplace that there wasn't a perceived need by the reader until they read the report. And, so the Internet Business Manifesto was all about treating your online endeavor as a business. And the Maven one that you mentioned was all about becoming the thought leader in your market. And the Attention Age Doctrine 2 was about the rise of social media, before people were really talking about social media. And the Attention Age 1 was all about how attention is becoming the scarce commodity, and you have to optimize your own attention and also figure out how to get the attention of the marketplace. But in the Internet Business Manifesto, there were really 2 points that I think were often missed by a lot of people. So even if people haven't read it and they decide to read it, which, to this day, I still get a lot of testimonials just from people who read the report, let alone go through our program.